We're going now to deal with the 7 churches, but we'll deal with the establishment of the churches by Christ, because it started in the year 30 CE, when Christ had ordained the 70, sent them out. In Luke 10, 1 and 17, he sent them all out, and then prior to his execution on Wednesday the 5th of April 30 CE, he gave them a series of instructions, and then after his resurrection and in preparation for them to receive the Holy Spirit, he gave a series of instructions to the churches of God, to all of the 500, which included the 70 that he had ordained and sent out to establish their power and their authority over the demons. Now, he did that, and they were then sent out from his position in Jerusalem, from Jerusalem, and the receipt of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost 30 CE. And it's important that you all understand the dates and the times and what happened, because there's a serious error in the churches of God that came out of the Sardis system, suggesting that Christ was killed in 31 CE, emanating from a forgery in the King James Version in Daniel chapter 9. All of that is important, and you must understand the sign of Jonah and the history of the reconstruction of the temple in order to understand what's happening with the church. So what happened was that the church was established, and these people, the 70 and the 500, went to different locations. And we had said that James, the brother of Christ, was one of the 2 anointed ones in Daniel 9:25, and he was killed in the 69th week of years, because there were 70 weeks of years, and he was killed in 63 CE in the 69th week of years, at the end of the 69th week, which left then, they knew then there was 1 week of years left to go before the destruction of the temple. They then elected Clopas in replacement of James, the brother of Christ. They then went firstly to Pella for the sequence of safety, because there was a Roman garrison given at Pella. Now, they came back to Jerusalem after the problems had smoothed out, and they came back into Judea, and the church then did not remain there but moved on to Ephesus. And that was the first position of the church and the first location. That was the Ephesian era of the church. Now also they moved through to Britain, and they established the church in Britain. It was established under Aristobulus on lands given to Joseph of Arimathea by his grandson-in-law, and that man was Arviragus, king of the Silurians, operating from Gloucester. And he gave them 12 hides of land in order to build the church. And Aristobulus was the one sent. Linus was sent to Rome as the first bishop of Rome, because his family were there in Rome. Now the church was established in Britain, right through the Middle East and into India. And the church was established in India by Thomas. Now all of these, the distribution is covered in paper number 122D, the establishment of the church under the 70. All of that is important that you read and understand what did happen. It wasn't done from Rome at all. It was done from Jerusalem by the Christ, and they went out right throughout the world. There was also the church established in Arabia and from Damascus and through into the Nabatean kingdom, which resulted in the church at Petra. We will deal with that church in Petra and Becca when we go into the Pergamus era. This sequence of the churches was important in us understanding that they established over the world and they were in eras. The 7 churches are in Turkey, but these 7 cities represent 7 eras, and they are of these sequences, as we will read the prophecies concerning these churches, they exist some of them exist at the coming of the Messiah. But they are given a lampstand and an angel over each of those 7 churches. Now, I'll talk now about Ephesus. To the angel of the church in Ephesus write the words of he who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. This is the power of prophecy under the 7 angels for the 7 churches. I know your works, your toil and your patient endurance, and how you cannot bear evil men, but have tested those who call themselves apostles, but are not, and found them to be false. I know you are enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake. You have not grown weary, but I have this against you, that you have abandoned your love, the love you had at first. Remember then from what you have fallen, repent and do the works you did at first. If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place unless you repent. Yet this you have, you hate the works of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who conquers, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. Now, this is quite a significant prophecy. It goes on then to deal with the church in Smyrna. And they did operate together, and the bishop of Smyrna was trained by John at Ephesus and established the church at Smyrna as its bishop. And he was then replaced by Polycrates. So Polycarp was the first bishop of Smyrna, and he was replaced by Polycrates, and Polycarp in his, we will deal with that when we start talking about Smyrna. But the text and the videos on Ephesus are longer, quite significantly longer, and it deals with what's happening at Ephesus, what the beliefs and the systems of worship were at Ephesus, what happened with the silversmiths, how the 2 that were ordained by Christ collapsed and went back into paganism. All of these things are covered in 122D and also in the texts on 122 and 170. these show you what happened through that first few centuries, or the first 7 centuries to be precise, with the establishment of the church throughout the world. It's important that we understand that Ephesus was where the church went from Jerusalem, and they established themselves at Ephesus and used that with Peter at Antioch and Babylon, dealing with the establishment of the church in the Middle East. Peter was not in Rome. He was never Bishop of Rome. He was the apostle in charge of the people in the dispersion through from the north, through from Syria, north right up into the steppes. And he organised and converted, baptised people right through to the Black Sea and into Thrace and into the steppes, right through into Bactria. And the other, Thomas, went into Bactria and then into India and established the church there. All of this was done as part of the Ephesian era. And it had nothing to do with Rome, other than the fact that Linus was in Rome, living from the house of the Britons with his father and uncles and the families of the Britons. They then basically established the church throughout the world, and it was based on the doctrines of the Bible. It was Sabbatarian, it was Quartodeciman, it kept the feasts and the holy days according to the temple calendar. Hillel didn't exist. Hillel was a heresy yet 3 centuries in the future. The church never kept Hillel until Armstrong brought it in 1940 with Duggar. These churches were established, and they were to assist and move on into the next sequence. But Smyrna was a bitter experience through the persecutions, and we will see that, how the persecution started out. We are at the Ephesus Museum in the town of Seljuk near Kusadasi. I'm with my friend Ercan Gurel, who is an architect and has done extensive works in the Ephesus area. And I'd like, behind us you'll see the statue of Artemis, which is the Artemis of Ephesus mentioned by Paul, about Paul in the New Testament. I'd like Ercan to talk to us about the cult of Artemis here, the cult of the Mother Goddess. Ercan, would you like to take over?
Yes, with pleasure, thank you. Well, in every city of Anatolia, there was a major god or a goddess, the chief deity of their cities. Here in Ephesus, the chief goddess is Artemis, the goddess of virginity, the goddess of fertility, protective goddess of the elements. In fact, in ancient times, there were 2 different kinds of Artemis, the Greek Artemis and the Anatolian Artemis. Greek Artemis is the goddess of virginity and the protective goddess of the hunters, whereas the Anatolian Artemis is the goddess of fertility, which we see a statue right behind me with the numerous breasts, which are the symbols of her fertility, with the reliefs of the animals. She was the protective goddess of them. Also on both sides we can see lions figures, which are the symbols being used 7,000 years before Christ in Anatolia on Mother Goddess figurines, especially Kibele statues. Also on the statue we can see some bees, B on both sides. B was the symbol of Ephesus city. On the coinage on one side it was the B, on the other side it was the head of the Roman emperor. Above the head as the crown we can see the model of the temple. The feet are missing. This statue is from 1st century before Christ, and also found in the city of Ephesus at the town hall. When Christianity was being widely spread in Anatolia, these statues were being broken into pieces. It was the first Christians did not like the existence of the pagan statues. So the reason of being found at the town hall, those people who were ordered to destroy the two statues of Artemis, which the other one is on the other side, kept them in the town hall, carefully buried them, and during the recent excavations after 1930, it's been brought to light. This is a good example of its type. There is another one which is made of good quality marble on the other side.
Now, following on from Ercan's explanation of Artemis, Ephesus is the cult center of Artemis, and the temple of Artemis is located here. Now, this is a frieze from the temple of Artemis, and you'll notice that Artemis and Zeus are located on the same level. That is, Artemis occupied a level with Zeus, on an equality with Zeus, as the mother goddess figure. Now, this mother goddess figure is the origin of the worship of the Virgin Mary in Christianity. And you will find that what has taken over here is the cult of the Virgin, and the house of the Virgin Mary occupies a position which runs in levels. Now, we'll talk about that later in these ascending levels of the cult of the Virgin related back to Artemis. What's important here in this frieze is that we see there is an alpha representing Artemis, but also representing the beginning of the structure of the Alpha and Omega. Now, in Revelation, we deal with Christ as Alpha and Omega, and there's a message being given in Revelation which has not properly been understood. This Alpha and Omega relates to the creation, the beginning, and the end of the purpose of the creation of God. Artemis here is claiming position as Mother Goddess as the beginning of the creation of God. And in the cult of Christianity, of the cult of the Virgin, she is depicted as the Mother of God. In other words, she is the Alpha and not God. So that is what we are seeing here coming from the worship of Artemis at Ephesus. And that's a very important aspect. There are other important cult aspects as well, which relate to the statue, the second statue of Artemis, which I will point to here. Now, we can deal with that at a later stage, and we'll discuss this matter. We'll go across here now. In this statue of Artemis, which Ercan had explained to you, has in this sequence a slightly different sequence on the sides. There is the many breasts of the goddess. There is the cherub rose B, ending with a rose at the bottom. And in the top of the necklace, you have grapes, which relate back to the cult of Dionysius. You have the animals, where she was protectress of animals rather than the virgin huntress, as found amongst the Greeks. She was the many-breasted fertility mother goddess, protector of animals, but also you'll see a position around her bodice of the zodiac. Now, the zodiac is centered on a bodice in Scorpio. Now, this is a very interesting aspect we'll discuss later, because normally there's no cult figure, if you like, or association in the biblical and other cults with Scorpio. What is normally associated is in the 7th month, which became the 9th month, or September in our system. You see the earlier Feasts of Tabernacles amongst the Jews and other harvest festivals. This month of Scorpio begins the long process into Sagittarius of the Saturnalia and of the cult of Dionysius, of the Orphic system and the Bacchic system amongst the Romans. Now I think this important aspect we will deal with later, because the whole structure of the zodiac in the cults we find at the time of Christ do not actually relate to the heavens as they were at the time of Christ. And the biggest single cult in this system was not just the Mother Goddess, but Mithras, as it was associated with the Mother Goddess system. The Mithras system does not have the heavens set up as they were at the time of Christ when the cult was at its largest, but rather the bull slaying system relates back to the heavens 2000 BC. And it takes us completely back 2000 years before Christ, and we will see this recurrent theme from various other positions, such as the Cybele or Cybele figurines and the inscriptions that we will see and deal with later on in this museum and this talk. We are here at the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. I'm with the curator of the museum there, Mr. Cengiz Ichan, who is an archaeologist and, as I said, a curator of the museum. This is the place where Paul gave his famous address to the Ephesians, and where the craftsmen of Ephesus set up a clamor against Paul, saying, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians," which was in fact a reference to Artemis of Ephesus. Cengiz will now talk to us about the area and the temple and some of the very interesting aspects relating to it.
You know, you can see the backside of us. This was the temple of Artemis. This temple was the seven wonders of the world, and the temple, you know, the separate the time, the first archaic period, the classic period, and the Roman period. The whole temple was the same area, but you can see only today one column. This area was the temple area, and the other part was the altar. And this temple was excavated by the Austrian. And the last 35 years, we have two friends of us, the Anton Bamer and Ulrike the Moose. They find many good evidence. For example, under the archaic temple, they find some early pieces. Some of the pieces was the Celtic pieces.
It's very important to us, the Hittites and the Celts.
Yes, and also if you want, you can. If you find it their article, you will get more detail it's about.
Thank you, Cengiz.
Yeah, that's welcome.
Now, what do you think of as important at the time of Paul? You might describe part of the temple of how it was constructed. It seems to be a very large edifice with colonnades everywhere.
You know, maybe the latest temple was its discussion. It's about just like the football
stadium. Football stadium. Yes, full size. Yes, it's about the size of a football field. Yes.
And there was a two colonnade all around.
How many columns?
117, I'm sorry, 116, 126 ve 126, and the other one.
It's 126 colonnades.
Yes.
On the
Wow,
flanks.
that's amazing. Now, you were mentioning earlier that this was used as the first bank, and we might explain some of the banking system, that they were actually using the temple as a bank.
Of course, you will explain it's about.
In fact, the valuables of the city of Ephesus were all kept here at the site of the temple. In order to be a good merchant in Ephesus, to be able to make some business with the neighboring colonies, you have to get the confidence of the temple. In some articles, I read that some of the priests of the temple were supporting some of the merchants in Ephesus city. For instance, they found out a piece of plug which was written, "I, Stephanos, the priest from the temple of Artemis, guarantee that the bearer of this letter is a good man, nice man, is trustworthy, you can make business with him."
These are the first business references, and in fact the first passports.
Bravo, likewise. And the concept of the banks originally come out from this place. They were giving loans to the merchants, getting something in return. So this was a very rich corner. In fact, the coffers of the state most probably was emptied by the priests from inside. They believe that it was an inside job. They have taken everything and then they disappeared afterwards. Before disappearing, they did set up a big fire.
I see, and they burned it down.
They claimed that everything was burned.
A Jewish stock take, some of our people would say. Yeah.
That's why it's very important. And during those days, the important things of the temple and Ephesus were all kept here in one corner.
Right.
But the priests have shared it, and it's all gone.
You can see then that Paul, in his oration, preaching the risen Christ and the one true God, would have struck at the very economic heart of these people. That's what the fuss was all about. He was actually challenging their business center and the very temple that formed the bank of their finance system.
You're absolutely right, because having the control of the money of Ephesus city is the best thing in this area. It was a fight for economical reasons, not because they hated Paul and loved paganism or vice versa.
No.
In fact, those people who did start the big riot at the Grand Theater were appointed as the Archbishop of Asia Minor, Demetrius and his friends, and they started living in the city of Smyrna.
Right. Yes.
What has changed within the past 3 years? They became the best Christians. Most probably, there was a better profit in becoming the Archbishop of Asia Minor and living in the Smyrna rather than working as a silversmith in Ephesus.
That is a very interesting point. Whether it was true conversion or conversion for profit, people perceive their advantage in certain systems, and that's probably the reason why many of these pagan practices were incorporated into Christianity by unscrupulous priests who were really profiteers. The same profiteers that ran Artemis, the temple of Artemis, became some of the early Christians and brought in some of the pagan practices for the same lucrative benefits. Yes, that's always been a problem within any success story. You get the bad with the good. Yes, it's very interesting, the connection with the Hittites, and we notice that here the Hittites and the other Celts, and that we have just been to Troy, and we will go to Miletus, where we see this Hittite connection with Troy and Ephesus and Miletus, and the port was here. We'll go and see the port later, which indicates that we're dealing with a maritime empire of vast proportions.
That's right.
And connecting with Knossos as well. We'll deal with that later as well. Thank you very much, Stengus. Would you like to say more?
No, in English. You know, there was another the big Hittite castle near the metropolis.
Near Metropolis, it's called Torbala. It's been newly excavated. In fact, very close to the new assignment of Genghis, where he is excavating. at Bellevue Mausoleum.
Oh, very
at
nice.
Metropolis, they found out
It's a
also some
huge one,
some
settlement.
evidences.
for the
Huge
evidence.
Hittite Celt
huge
settlement.
Over
settlement there. Huge
And
Hittite
the other
castle.
one, the liman, Panastepe şeydeki, Urla'daki. Ve bu bir Hitit şeyi artık.
Next to the city of
What
Klazomenai,
century are we dealing with?
13. yüzyıl, 14. yüzyıl.
13th, 14th century before Christ.
So 13th, 14th century BC, same time Troy was in its peak, same time Mycenae was at its peak, Miletus was at its peak, massive Hittite civilizations right
Ve
around the world.
şeydekini de söyle şimdi, Heraklia'daki
And also
bir şey.
in the city of Heraclea, near Lake Baffa, on the mountains of
Hittites,
Latmos, they
Hittites.
found out
Yes.
some Hittite inscriptions and Hittite remains. These are the recent finds of archaeology.
We are dealing with the history of the Hittites and of the Parthians. Well, the Parthians came from this area and went into northwestern Europe. We were discussing that earlier. And the Celts also went into that area. We're dealing with Turkey as the cradle of civilization of all of the Celts, Anglo-Saxons, all the northwestern Europeans, all come from this area, and the Middle East down through to Israel. That is of major importance and shows the cradle of civilization here needs much more excavation and much more importance than simply
true.
looking at a Greco-Roman
It's the
system.
opening mouth of civilization from here to Europe.
Ercan,
Yes.
yani bütün şeyler çok çabuk değişiyor arkeolojide artık Türkiye'de. Çünkü çok geniş yerde
As the
arkeolojik
years go
şeyler
by,
başladı.
everything changes very rapidly in the world of archaeology.
Yes, yes, and I think we are learning now and talking with Mustafa Ashkin, whom you both know, at Troy. We're seeing that only now they're changing to embrace this concept that the Hittites were the Celts and they were there at the time, and the fall of Troy is probably coinciding with the rise of Israel under Saul and David. It's a massive
Why not?
story.
That is true. That is true.
Thank you very much. Let's go on to the next phase.
Okay.
Well, we're here at the Basilica of St. John in Ephesus. This basilica is attributed to the 2nd century, and in this basilica is what is attributed as the tomb of St. John, whose remains were moved in medieval times.
That's right.
And removed to Bari,
To Italy, yes.
to Italy. Now, Richard, what would you like to tell us about this basilica?
Well, before Jesus died on the cross, he told John to take good care of his mother. While John was coming to Anatolia, he brought Mother Mary together with him. And they settled somewhere in the vicinity of this hilltop. But soon after, the pagans did not like their arrival. They were being persecuted. John couldn't stand the pressure, which in the same time he was writing the last book of the Bible, the Revelation.
Which he wrote on Patmos.
Yes. And
We're talking about John and the question of his background. He was a Levite by the contemporary records, and he wore the ephod right throughout his life. He appears to be a genuinely loving character. The records are that they carried him around Ephesus in his later years, and he urged people to love one another. He must have been a remarkable man.
yes, he was. In fact, he did quite a lot of job here in Ephesus city, and he finished the last book of the Bible. He died here in peace and comfort without being tortured or canonized, and he's been buried on this hilltop. Probably, I mean, the church of Ephesus was here, somewhere around here. As you know,
This is the wooden building you're
yes,
talking about.
I will come
yes.
to that point.
Yeah.
As you know, when we say the church of Ephesus, we don't mean a particular building. We mean a group of people,
yes.
a community. I mean, a small area where they can get together and teach each other Christianity. And probably the church of Ephesus was in this area, in this vicinity. That might be the reason why he was buried on this hilltop. And the grave area is in the background, over there.
Yes, immediately behind us is the
Right
tomb of
behind
John.
us.
Yeah.
There are some steps at the beginning of the altar, leading down to the grave
Crypt.
area,
The crypt. Yeah,
to the
tomb,
crypt.
yeah, yeah.
And over there's another hole. Throughout the medieval ages, sacred dust arising from the grave throughout this hole was believed to have healing properties.
So they collected the sacred dust.
They were coming here especially to inhale that sacred dust.
Oh, I see.
This was one of the places where pilgrimages were made to, and where pilgrimages have started from here, kept on going to Jerusalem.
Good. What can you tell us about the building? It was begun in the 2nd century.
And in fact, after the death of John, just to mark the area, at first a wooden church was built on the spot. Later on, during the time of Emperor Justinian in 6th century AD, they did construct this monumental building with all the marble structures have been built by the architects and the mathematicians of Justinian. In fact, this building is contemporary with Hagia Sophia or Saint Sophia of Istanbul.
Right. So this is part of Justinian's revival.
Yes,
The structure.
and the people did work here during the construction in the name of God, without being paid. And day and night, in a couple of years' time, they finished this huge church area, huge basilica, in fact, in the name of God, in 6th century AD.
That's a credit to the people taking part in the work.
Yes, they have done it a beautiful volunteer job.
So that's one of the few voluntary jobs in total of any of the churches. Many of the churches in the world have voluntary or contributed labour from stonemasons and other things. This was entirely built with voluntary labour. I think that's a credit to the people in Ephesus.
Definitely. You can see how much Christianity was appreciated.
Yes.
From that point of view.
Yes, that's through Justinian's revival and the Byzantine period.
Yes.
Are there any other points you'd like to cover about
on the capitals, in fact, at the very entrance of the church, on the capitals, you can see the monograms, initials of Emperor Justinian and his wife Theodora. That's a nice gimmick. You can see also the same monograms on the capitals of Saint Sophia Church of Istanbul.
Istanbul, yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Same architects, as I said, same master builders, same mathematicians did work for the
on both
construction.
areas.
Yes.
Ah, yes. And the Church of St. Sophia in Istanbul is a beautiful edifice.
Beautiful.
And so too must this have been. We will take photographs and you will see just how beautiful this area is, and even now today is ruined. It's still an impressive edifice.
It is.
Thank you, Achan.
I thank you.
You know, in this part of Ephesus, we have the many offering place to the Mother Goddess Cybele. And then later on, they take it out, whole statue of Cybele, they put it the cross. I mean, the change of the mind. And also, I believe that all this area, the first was the Mother Goddess of Cybele, and the later Artemis of Ephesia, and the later is the same Mother Goddess, the Marys. And also, still we have some many settlement. For example, you will see over there the building still under the earth. If we excavate it there, we can find in the early Roman settlement. Sen oraya kaydırıyorsun. Tamam. And you can see still we have some. You know, the backside, this was the one pool. The shape exactly the baptisteria, but it is not. This pool just to collect to the water. Yeah, the excavation of Ephesus is nearly 107 years old. And the city was excavated nearly 10% and the rest of them under the earth.
Yes. At the moment, we are at the upper gate, the Magnesian gate of Ephesus city. And this whole area is the uptown, the political heart, the brain part of ancient Ephesus. Right behind us, it's the town hall, the Prytaneion. This was the place where the perpetual fire of Hestia was burned. This was also the place of perpetual fire. The temple of Hestia was very important. Here, those virgin nuns from the age of 18 until 40, they were serving the temple and the goddess Hestia. Their jobs was to keep the perpetual fire on and serve the temple. In this area, they have also found out some inscriptions dealing with the Amazons. There are even more inscriptions written in ancient Greek on these Doric columns about the laws and the rules of the city. Behind these columns to the left are the rooms belonging to the Temple of Hestia. That's where the perpetual fire was burned. And also in the other room, they found out the statues of Artemis Ephesia, which nowadays on display at the local archaeological museum. Opposite of the Odeon and the town hall, it's the State Agora. This was the place where the representatives were getting together, discussing war and peace, also the political future of ancient Ephesus. So the State Agora, the town hall, and the next door building over there is the Odeon for the senators. In ancient times, the first Odeon in the world was built in Athens during the reign of famous Pericles. The Odeon could seat 1,400 people. It was a roofed over building. The wooden roof was destroyed in a fire of unknown date. For the archaeologists found out some petrified ashes. Still, the upper part of the Agora needs excavations. Now we are in front of the Temple of Domitian. This is the first temple constructed for the cult of the Roman Emperor. It was built in 1st century BC, and throughout the history in the city of Ephesus there have been 4 imperial cults. And the imperial cult was set up to provide solidarity and security at the Roman Empire, without considering any races, language, or the religion. And those people who refused to give a low bow in front of the Roman deities, Roman emperors, were being slaughtered. For instance, in the Bible, the message to the church of Pergamon, it reads, "My faithful man, Antipas, was martyred at the altar of Zeus." With the altar of Zeus is also described as the Satan's seat or the Satan's throne. Throughout the history, the altar of Zeus in the city of Pergamon and the Temple of Domitian served for such kind of purposes. The buildings around the temple on both sides are the shops, which was being used for different purposes. We are now in front of the fountain of Emperor Trajan. This was a two-storied building, and the restoration was done like this, just to give us an idea what it looked like during those days. Formerly, the colossal statue of the emperor stood in the middle of facade. At the present time, the surviving base with the 2 feet and the globe has been restored back to its original position. The missing parts of the first and the second story have already been used for the construction of that Byzantine castle on the top. That's why restoration was done like this, to give us an idea what it looked like during those days. As I've told you at the very beginning, formerly there was the statue of the emperor, which stood in the middle of facade. At the present time, the surviving base with the 2 feet and the globe has been restored back to its original position. This globe with 1 foot on the top is the symbol of the earth. By putting his foot on the top, he says, I reign the whole world. I'm the only emperor in the world, which means they knew that the world was round. They expected this world at least to be round. How come? By the help of natural philosophers, such as Thales, Anaximenes, Anaximandres, Heraclitus, Hecatatus, all those people were either born in this area, or they grew up here, or they went to school in Ephesus. A well-known chap named Heraclitus, born and raised here, very famous natural philosopher, he says, tapandari, which in English means everything flows away. But that's a metaphor. He wanted to give us a message. He says, tapandari, which means enjoy it while you can, forget about tomorrow. You will never have the same beauty, same handsomeness, same health conditions. It's all going away. It's all flowing. That's why these people were belonging to a hedonist society. They did thoroughly enjoy their time with all those sumptuous debauchery parties, and like the movies of the Gladiator, I, Claudius, or Caracalla, that kind of lifestyle was being performed in Ephesus city. Lifespan was very short, even though they knew everything about human anatomy, but they were lacking the hygienic conditions. That's why people were dying at a very young age. Tapanderi in ancient Greek, carpe diem in Latin. So these people did thoroughly enjoy their time without thinking of tomorrow. Especially in 2nd century AD, when the city was passing through its golden ages, that kind of lifestyle was being widely spread. Because when we look at their monumental fountains, houses, and the other buildings, no time and expense was spared for the construction of such buildings, serving for public and for their private purposes. We are now in front of the building where the parting reliefs have been brought to light. Those parting reliefs were used for decorations of this building, which was in the shape of an altar, like the one of Zeus in the city of Pergamon, with several steps, and the building dates from 1st and 2nd century AD. Later on, they have constructed a beautiful pool in front of the library between the periods of 4th and 5th century AD, and those parting reliefs have been removed from here, used for the decorations of the pool in 5th century AD.
We're now sitting in the amphitheater in Ephesus. Earlier we had been in the temple of Artemis, and we had discussed the fact that the merchants of Artemis had interrupted Paul in Ephesus, and that they had done so for mercenary reasons, for economic reasons, where the temple was acting as a bank, and that Paul was interrupting by preaching the risen Christ and the one true God, their business, their livelihood was threatened, because they were actually using the temple as a bank. They were taking banking references and passports effectively on tablets around the countryside, establishing their bona fides. Now, what had happened was that in this amphitheater, it was perfect acoustics. Paul was to address the people of Ephesus. Now, the merchants came here and set up such a racket. They appealed to Diana of Ephesus. Now, we know for a fact that there was no temple of Diana here in Ephesus. There's a temple of Artemis. They were making a direct appeal to the visitors and to the Roman and Greek authorities, or the Hellenized authorities. The Roman authorities were more interested in what was happening with the gods, and by appealing to Diana of Ephesus, they were hoping to curry favor with the Roman authorities here, and put Paul in a bad light, which they managed to do for some time with Christianity as an entire structure. However, it wasn't successful, but Paul, that is the reason and the background for this meeting and the ruckus that was caused here, and ultimately with the opposition put up by people like the guilds here in Ephesus, Paul was ultimately martyred in Rome, and as were all of the apostles. There's only one apostle that wasn't martyred, and that is John, as prophesied by Christ, who said that, "What is it to you if he lives till I come?" And John was Bishop of Ephesus, living here. So this is the only place ruled by an apostle who was not martyred. I think that says a lot for John and his personality, the fact that Christ had spared him, and also the importance and status of Ephesus as a metropolis. We've seen a great deal of the artifacts and the excavations here. Asia Minor is rich in these excavations, and Ephesus is an outstanding example as a city of the rich cultural heritage that the first century church established itself in. Well, Fazan and I are here in the town of Miletus, tracing the footsteps of Paul. We've come here from Ephesus. and from the port of Kusadasi. Now what's significant, we're in a caravanserai which was built in the 14th century, in 1300 and something, and it's Fazan will tell us more about it. But the important thing about this caravanserai is that it was built near the water, near the ancient seaport at Miletus in the 14th century, which tells us that the waters had not begun to recede in this mini cold snap we've had, this mini ice age, until the 14th century, which means that it's quite more recent than we had initially thought, and it's less than 1,000 years ago. So we're looking at about 600 years ago, the waters began to recede rather dramatically. And I think that's an important part about this place. Now, would you like to tell us more about the caravanserai and what happens here?
Okay, caravanserais, what happened was that when the Turkish tribes started to move into Anatolia in about 11th century, and then the Byzantine frontiers were withdrawing towards the inner parts of Anatolia, and then the boundaries or the frontiers were fluctuating a lot, and because of this changes of the boundaries, there was lack of control on the trade routes, and the lack of control or security brought the problem of brigands attacking them at nights and other places. So in order to improve the standards of economy, the Selçuklu emperors built caravanserais on trade routes, and it was with the intentions of keeping them safe within the walls of the caravanserai. Caravanserais are sort of like small castles with walls around it, and with a big door which gets closed at nights after the sun sets. And each caravanserai was built within 30 kilometers of a distance, which is the pace of a camel from sunrise to sunset. And so these caravanserais were built all over the country, and then which really helped to improve the economy of Anatolia at that time, and then of course improve the economy and the standards of the Selçuklu Empire, and then which brought up the fine arts that we happen to see about the Selçukis in the preceding years. So caravanserai, this one is at the very end of the peninsula of the Anatolia or Asia Minor, and which was built, as Mr. Cox said, that sometimes in 1300s, which was fairly near to the seaside, where they could easily continue on with their trade back and forth. Thank you,
Fazan. And it's a beautiful, now the caravanserai is used for the sale of Turkish carpets, which we see behind us, which are quite lovely pieces of work, and there are various types all over Turkey of these quite magnificent pieces of art, which is fast disappearing as we modernize. Well, let's go and have a look at Miletus, and let's go in search of Paul. Well, we're here at Miletus in the footsteps of Paul. We know from Acts 20 that Paul bypassed Ephesus when he came in from Samos, and he took ship to the port of Miletus, and at that time Miletus was a seaport. The oceans were quite some meters higher than they are now, and even though we're 7 kilometers from the sea, and we're in the middle of a great plain, a fertile plain on the Meander River, this was once a harbour port on an isthmus inside a massive inland sea, and that the sea just began receding quite recently. In the 1st century AD, the harbour, as we've seen, the harbour went right into the town, and the people disembarked at the wharf and went to the baths that we've seen on the in the pan, and they cleaned up before they went on into the town. That way they controlled hygiene, disease, and various other problems that they might have had. So Paul would have done that. He would have arrived here by ship. Well, he did arrive here by ship, and he would have then gone to the baths, cleaned up, and gone into the town. When he was here, Acts records that he sent for the elders at Ephesus, because the Holy Spirit had told him that he was to be imprisoned. Now, he wished to say goodbye to the elders at Ephesus, and he had bypassed the city. So he sent for them, and the elders came here to Miletus, and he addressed them. Whether he addressed them in this amphitheatre is open to conjecture, anyone's guess, but he may very well have done so. The departure from here led ultimately to his arrest and imprisonment, and the later letters that he had sent to the church, which form the New Testament. But we know in the Acts that he was here. There was a church formed here as a result of his operations from Ephesus, and the structure of the church was such that even though John was at Ephesus and was in fact the bishop of Ephesus for a long period of time, for a further 40-odd years, John was presiding at Ephesus. We see that Paul was evangelizing in this area and knew the Ephesian church well, so much so that he could ask the elders to come to Miletus to see him for his onward journey. You've seen the implications of the city. The city was built on a peninsula as a fortress, and it was capable with its agoras of sustaining prolonged siege, and it was quite a strategic location. Now it's just a large mound or peninsula within the Meander Valley, but then it was a complete island, virtual island or peninsula with a narrow neck, surrounded completely by ocean. And I think that the implications we can draw from this, leaving aside the aspects of the New Testament, is that sometime up to the 13th century, the waters began to recede. We know for a fact by the 14th century, the beginning of the 14th century, that this caravanserai was built at Miletus, but the water had begun to recede. That is, the caps had begun to grow and ice was formed at increasing rates on the caps, and that the water levels slowly receded, and within a few centuries we were at the current sea levels that we have today. And those sea levels will not be permanent, and the melting of the caps is forming at such a great rate that this once again will be an island if indeed it's not completely submerged in water. One of the things that we should be looking at is, if you want to see it, you should see it as soon as you can, because it's a very, very interesting city, and you can see the dynamics of its operation from the ruins that are here and preserved, and you can see quite clearly the harbour and where the sea was. And 494, the fleet here, the Ionian fleet, was completely destroyed by the Persian fleet at Lade Island. And you can see the island. We've taken a photo at Lade Island, and you will be able to see where the fleet was destroyed. And it'll give you an indication, idea that this was a seagoing area where there's a complete fleet tied up in what is now a fertile plain 7 kilometres from the existing coast. And I think that's important to bear in mind. And we'll talk further about Paul's journeys and about the other churches of Asia Minor as we proceed.
We're at the city of Miletus. It's in the Meander Valley. It's one of the major cities of the Ionic period. Well, the city dates back to 1500 BC. At a hill named Kalabak Tepe, they came across shards dating back to those years. And later on, the city is mentioned by Homer that the Malaysians from here fought at the Trojan Wars, and he sort of mentions them as warlike, vulgar people that fought very courageously at the Trojan War. So this is it. And then during the years, when we look at the general map of the area, we know that Miletus was quite away from the other cities. So what happened was that the people of Miletus found the 3 mat sailboats. With the 3 mat sailboats, they opened to the sea and were able to get in touch with Priene, Ephesus, and other cities very easily, and go on with sea commerce. Around 6th and 5th century BC, they had built several colonies on the Dardanelles Strait, Marmara Sea, and at the Black Sea, and it totaled up to be 90 colonies of all the other ancient cities, which is quite a number, as you can see. And that's with the around 5th century, the Persian invasion, as Mr. Cox mentioned about the Lade Island, where the Pan-Ionian fleet was burned. And then with the Persians leveled the city totally. And what happened was that with the Roman annexation, the city prospered again and was quite a very prosperous city, and lived to be around the Byzantine period. And then around 1300, the Selçukis came, Turkoman tribes, named as Selçukis, came and built the new places such as the İlyas Bey Mosque, the Caravanserai, and a Selçuklu bath near it. Now the city has some important inputs to our civilization, such as around 5th century BC, people from Miletus picked up the Phoenician language alphabet and adopted, and later on this alphabet was picked up by the Greeks and then became the standard Greek alphabet. So the alphabet was a pathway for the alphabet from Phoenicia to Greek, the mainland Greek. And in the years of prosperity, that's about 6th century BC and all, we have the philosophers, such as the father of philosophy, Thales, was born here, and a mathematician. And Hippopotamus happened to come from here, and he had set the grid plan of the cities of Priene as well as Miletus after the Persian devastation. And Anaximander and Anaximandus, both of them geographers and natural philosophers, all came from this city of Miletus. So Miletus lived a very full life, rich with sea trade, and then rich in culture as well too.
Well, we're in Turkey, standing in a poppy field, which was used to grow opium poppies. near the town of Honuz. Littered in the field, every square foot is littered with shards of very ancient, very high quality pottery. What we're looking at is a tell, a large mound on which underneath is buried a city, and the city we are standing on is the city of Colossae. This is the city of the Colossians of the New Testament, where Paul wrote an epistle to this city, and we'll now hear something about the history of the town.
Just a very few words about around 6th and 5th century BC, the city was on the commercial road from Sardis to Iconium. So it was a very lively city and a well-off city. By 1st century BC, the city of Laodicea was founded, and sort of this started the decline of Colossae. And 60 AD, a major earthquake brought a lot of damage to the cities of Colossae, Laodicea, and Hierapolis. The other cities was rebuilt by the Roman emperors and flourished, but unfortunately Colossae was left. And 7th century AD, Arab invaders further pushed the decline, and the city just declined totally. Now this city was well known for its deep red-colored wool, which the Romans called it Colosseum. So that's much I can say about the city of Colossae. Bitte.
We've seen many things about Colossae. One of the main messages was that there was a heresy here practicing a heresy in Galatia, and we'll proceed to examine that heresy and deal with some of the problems associated with it. But let's hope that more light can be shed on Colossae and what its life was like by archaeology, and that they have the funds to further excavate this city, which was an important city.